Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. I'm Dr. Loretta Howard, the lead co-host for this episode today, and I'm delighted to have with me Dr. Cheryl White, as well as Dr. Andre Howard. Our discussion today, we're continuing from last week about keeping the doors open, and we're focusing on sustaining nonprofits through funding, partnerships, and mergers. So, joining us as our guest today for this conversation is John Lydon. He's the Director of Strategic Products and the CEO Emeritus for Arbeline Ward and Pauline Auberle Foundation. I hope I'm saying that right, John. You'll have to
That's
correct me
good.
if I'm not. Okay, great. John is also a lawyer as well as an adjunct professor from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. So we'll get to hear more about him a little bit later in this episode. We always like to start our week off with an audience question, and our audiences have been sending in some amazing questions based on what they're listening to in our topics for each month. And so, John, you'll also have an opportunity to answer that question as well. I'm going to start off with Dr. Cheryl, then Andre, and then you, John. So, here's our audience question. What are some of the biggest challenges nonprofits face today when it comes to financial sustainability?
Hmm. All right. So, Dr. Loretta, you wanted me to start with that?
Yes, yes, would you please?
Okay. I think the biggest challenge is certainly the uncertainty within the markets and certainly the uncertainty within the government funding. So many nonprofits receive funding from government agencies, either directly from the federal government or maybe through the federal government that gets funded or funneled through their state or county local agencies. And with there being so much uncertainty at the federal level, there's a rippling of effect. And many of the, you know, contracts they receive have time limited with regards to 3 or 5 years, and that has allowed for some planning. But I think planning is really being challenged with regards to certainty. And even if it's not direct funding from the government, even the other entities that might be corporate sponsored or corporate sponsors, or perhaps personal donors, their pocketbooks have also been impacted, be it through the marketing challenges related to tariffs, or maybe market challenges related to layoffs, challenges also related to certainly our current government shutdown. So I think all of those things, when you impact um, others' pocketbooks, then
Mhm.
their ability to provide donations or funds to nonprofits that really contribute to worthy services are impacted too. And then we have to begin to think about, what essential services can we continue to provide? And unfortunately, what essential services may we not have the services to provide. So that definitely is, I think, a huge challenge that our nonprofits are facing today.
Thanks, Dr. Cheryl. Dr. Dre?
Yeah, in similar fashion to Dr. Cheryl, I think the rising operational cost again without,
Mhm.
corresponding revenue increases, right? Squeezing those budgets from all sides and
Mhm.
really having to deal with that challenge. The pressure to kind of keep overhead low, right? I mean, you get a grant or a donor that may say, well, as long as your overhead is only at 8%, 9%, and that's unbelievably, you can't do that, right? But believe it or not, a lot of our nonprofits try to meet that, and it doesn't. It really makes me question: Are we truly serving the community in the best way? And I think the last is just the lack of, I don't know, fiscal imagination of leaders of these organizations, just being caught up in the rhythm of thinking that, I'm going back to my, again, same donor, going back to the same funder year after year after year after year. That's all I have, and not thinking outside the box creatively. And so I think today's discussion will hopefully open our eyes and minds a bit more in terms of what we need to explore. So those would be a couple of things I would respond to in terms of that question.
Thank you so much. And John, would you also answer the question for us?
Sure, and I think those are two great perspectives. And if I could piggyback on that, as Dr. Sherrill noted, the uncertainty really weighs on everyone. And it starts with the financial uncertainty. And I'll just say, for the benefit of people on the show, Auberle is located in Pennsylvania. So not only do we have the federal budget stalemate, but in Pennsylvania, our Constitution requires a signed budget by June 30, and we don't have one. So we have a state impasse and a federal. And I think what happens if we look at that pressure on funding and that pressure on people to keep the doors open really impacts your ability to have a vision around corners and down the road. And it really tends to make us short-sighted. Combine that with, too, the change in focus in the country, both politically and also in giving habits of people. And I think put all those together, and the pressure on nonprofits is quite significant.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate everything all of you have said, and I absolutely agree with it. The only thing that I would add to it from some experience that I've had is sometimes the funds are restricted and they're just for a particular program, which kind of impacts. You can only use it for this while you might need funding in another area. And then there is such a large competition, it seems, for sometimes that same pot of money for nonprofits. But thank you so much for those answers. And to our audience, keep sending them in. Now, John, let's switch and let's hear a little bit about you and your leadership journey.
So my journey started as you indicated, as a lawyer. I was a practicing litigator for 20 some years. I've appeared in every court in Pennsylvania at every level and the United States Supreme Court. And it kind of covers your perception on how you approach issues and problems and stress. I taught for about 15 years at Pitt Law School, but also taught attorneys. I would do 3, 4 seminars a year in that regard. Along the way, before I really knew much about anything, a couple of years out of law school on a fluke, I got on the board of Auberle, loved the organization, loved the people, spent 20 some years on the board, chaired. We had two entities at that point. I've chaired both of them. And I always say, in a weak moment in early 2004, they convinced me to become the CEO, which was quite a change. Stumbled a lot. You're on the board, you think you know what's happening, and then you find in the staff position, you don't. You don't truly understand the challenges. So stumbled a bit, but also brought a different perspective, I think, which really fit well in the organization. And along the way, in Pittsburgh, we have an organization known as the Greater Pittsburgh Nonprofit Partnership, has about 450 members. And I spent 3 years as chair of public policy and my last 2 years on the board as chair of the board. I mention that because it created a lot of connections with leaders of nonprofits for candid conversations that I think definitely informed my journey as a leader. I just stepped down July 1 as CEO, and now, as you noted, allegedly in a part-time role. The part-time will start, I hope, soon, but director of strategic projects, trying to finish some things that we started.
Thank you so much, Dr.
And,
Dre.
and congratulations to you, John, on your promotion, if we call it that. So, um,
And it
a
is a
quick,
promotion.
that's more. A quick question, because I'm just nosy. We've been defining this podcast for this month is around this theme, keeping the doors open versus something else, like versus thriving. Is keeping the doors open a great way, an appropriate title for this series? And what's your thoughts on that? What's your thinking behind that?
Well, I think it's interesting because I do think it's a good title because it draws people in. Right now, especially with the pressure, we're focused on keeping the doors open, but I think a leader is always looking beyond the horizon and is always looking to thrive. And I think especially for a nonprofit, a lot of times we talk about our agencies and we talk about us, sometimes inadvertently, but really, what's the mission? The mission is to help other people. And if we're constantly trying to just keep the door open, are we doing the best possible service for the people we serve? And is that where we want to be? So whether it's a client of a nonprofit, a customer of a for-profit business, does that result in the best level of care? And I think we want to always keep our sights on something beyond that.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Cheryl?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Loretta. I'm wondering, John, what should CEOs or executive directors do about strategic partnerships when their organizations are struggling to meet payroll week to week?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's easier to talk about it than it is to do. But if every week we're trying to make payroll week to week, how is that ever going to change if that becomes our focus? What are we going to do, even in the face of a storm like we're in the midst of now? If we're not looking to the horizon, how are we changing things for the people we serve? And are we looking truly at our mission about how to move forward? So I think we have to create that space. And also, we have to ask ourselves, how is this going to change? If we don't build partnerships and we don't build outreach to people and we don't start to pull together as a group, how do we expect this to change? Doing the same thing over and over again. And I know how difficult it is, how stressful it is, but I also think in the back of that, one of the key factors for a leader is our staff. And our staff, if we're trying to make payroll week to week, our staff sees that. And what is the impact on, between a number of the executive orders coming down and some of the stressors that are all around us? What is the impact long term on keeping our people and helping them to thrive as people while we're supporting, say, client families, where are staff families? So we have to look at changing things, and partnerships are the best way to do it.
Hmm. Thank you, John.
Dr. Dre, do you want to ask your
Sure.
question?
Yeah, okay, yep, definitely. So, John, we've been talking about these strategic partnerships. I mean, how should a nonprofit maybe approach the process of building strategic partnerships? What is a strategic partnership, and what are the first steps a leader must think about when it comes to those strategic partnerships?
So to me, strategic partnership is kind of a broad category.
Mm.
It's where you're not kind of standing next to someone, you're actively engaging with them to achieve a common purpose. And I think if we go back and look first at what is our purpose, why do we exist? And honestly, in financially stressful times, it's easy to lose sight of that.
Mm.
So how are we helping the people we serve? How are we moving them forward? Who are we talking to? Do we take meetings? Do we build networks around us of other leaders and other people? And do we visit other people? I love to visit other facilities. I like to walk through and talk with you about what you're doing. No agenda in mind, just want to learn who's in our space, who's doing great things, and how do we collaborate to better serve the people we're with.
Yeah, love that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, I see we need to take a break right now, a short break. And when we return, Dr. Cheryl will continue with some additional questions for the our next episode. So please stay tuned and we'll be right back with more on leadership matters with the people's doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. Okay, welcome back for more of Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors. For those who are just joining us, I'm Dr. Loretta Howard, the lead host for today's episode. And we have Dr. Cheryl White and Dr. Andre, who we love to call Dr. Dre, today. And our guest helping us to learn more about keeping the doors open and sustaining nonprofits through funding and partnerships is John Lydon, the Director of Strategic Projects and CEO Emeritus of Auberle Ward Home Pauline Auberle Foundation. Before I turn it over to Dr. Cheryl, we have our second audience question. So I'm going to start with Dr. Dre, Dr. Cheryl, and then John. I'd like you to answer it as well. The audience wants to know, are there any common mistakes that you see nonprofits make when pursuing new funding or partnerships?
Another great question from the audience, and I'm guilty of this first one, right? Chase the money. It doesn't fit our mission, but hey, there's $1 million available out there. Let's go for it. I know it's something that we don't do or haven't done or not in our mission, but let's try to go after it. So I think that certainly is a big mistake. And again, I'll be the first to raise my hand in terms of doing that quite often in the past. I think for me has been a problem. I think the other piece is just over-promising on outcomes. I mean, again, it's so competitive out there, and so as we write for opportunities, I mean, we'll put a whole lot of stuff in there, a lot of promises we know are really unrealistic. We'll serve as many people as the next organization. We'll achieve dramatic behavior changes. We'll solve complex social problems. We'll change the world. So I think just over-promising on those outcomes too is another common mistake I've seen as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with what Dr. Dre has shared with regards to not just chasing money and not aligning ourselves relationally. In fact, we'll see that nonprofits can commonly make mistakes that are strategic as well as relational and administrative. I think about strategic errors might be failing to maybe define the mission, and as John was talking about previously, the vision clearly. Overemphasizing acquisition over retention may be another challenge. Um, Treating grants, I think Dr. Dre kind of talked about, I don't know if it was before were on air or we were on air, but really over-reliance on grants as this like the one strategy for funding may be another strategic um, mishap. Lacking a sustainable fundraising strategy is another challenge. Relationally, maybe approaching funders more transactionally versus relationally and trying to align what it is we're looking at doing based on what truly, where do our interests really align? And is this a partnership that I should be going after or not? And am I telling the story with some data? It doesn't have to be data that's numbers, it doesn't have to always be quantitative, but maybe it's qualitative that really shares the impact. Having a poorly engaged or trained board can also be something that creates challenges as well. And then maybe not having supporters as champions, or kind of going back to what Dr. Dre was talking about, that chasing the money maybe with an incompatible partner can also be a relational issue. And then, of course, we've seen some of those administrative um, challenges in that bucket that might be ignoring the data or relying on manual processes that it's just not allowing us to even keep up with what we need to be keeping up with to meet all of the promises that may have been made and the data that has to be provided to whoever that funder is, or to be able to share our story of impact. Maybe underestimating the need of infrastructure, lacking transparency as it relates to, finance, um, maybe failing to invest in relevant resources that might be needed, be that staffing, be it the technology that we just mentioned, and then neglecting to follow up and report on impact. I think any and all of those things might be some of the common mistakes that we might make as a nonprofits, that we really have to be more intentional about recognizing those potential pitfalls and not letting them be pitfalls for us.
And if I can add to that, I think those are great points. I think one of the other mistakes we make is fear. And this goes to
Good.
Dr. Sherrill's point. When you mention the word strategic partnership, you're thinking someone's going to take me over. My agency will get gobbled up in this. Auberle literally has hundreds of partnerships in multiple ways and programs. And that fear causes us not to consider this until it's too late. In the business sector, and I think about practicing law and for many years ran my own law firms regularly merge, businesses merge. And when we merge or we partner, we talk about taking two and two and making it five in the near term and 6 or 7 longer term. And I think what I see in the nonprofit side, we don't engage in these discussions till we're dying. And now we're trying to engage in it to survive. And frequently we're talking to someone else who's on their last couple steps, and we're not going to survive. And
Mhm.
I think if we look back at who we serve, are we making the best possible service? Are there opportunities to be better and not be afraid of the conversation? You won't be kidnapped, thrown in the trunk of the car, and forced to merge with someone. It's just a conversation. Engage in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. John, I love all of what you brought up, and again, what comes to mind, and maybe this was something that came up last week too, and that is healthy interdependencies, not a dependency. Like each of these entities can make it on their own, yet we believe that we'll be able to serve better and have greater impact if we decide to somehow connect and serve together. So I love that theme of interdependency, not necessarily finding ourselves in a space of dependency that neither one of us can make it on our own. So we're kind of coming together, but really merging from a much healthier space. John, what are some of the signs that a strategic partnership or even a merger might be the right move for a nonprofit?
My initial response to that, if you're okay with it, I'd like to reverse your question for
Sure.
just a minute. So when is it not the right move?
Mhm.
Your organization is able to serve every need that your clients have, not just the ones in your mission, every need, and you have more than enough funding to be able to do that, then I think there's an argument maybe you don't need a partnership. But
Mhm.
when you take one step away from that goal and you have nationally regarded outcomes, take one step away from that, that starts the point at which um, you should be looking at partnerships. Again, to the point that you just made, not to be gobbled up by someone, but to be interdependent. So if Auberle is doing workforce development, and our people don't have enough food to eat. What do we do about that? Do we ignore it? Do we talk to the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank and say, hey, how can we provide food for the people that are in our training program? How do we provide housing? How do we provide the needs? We have a saying here, no one comes to Auberle with one need. If you're homeless, there are reasons behind that. If you don't have a job, why is that? So we need to be able to meet all those needs. And if you're not able to do all that, if you don't have a tight network of good quality people you can refer to, I think you need to be talking about partnerships.
Hmm. Love that thought. My boss, who's Dwight Smith at the neighborhood house, we get to talking a lot about our roles as mandatory reporters, but he always reminds us also that we're mandatory supporters. And so I love the thought of if you can't meet the need, then how are you networking with others that we might be able to even use as referral sources to help people get plugged into the needs they may have? Thanks, John.
Thank you so much. I just want to go back real quickly to what you said, John, about the fear. That is so very real. And to have someone actually say that out
Mhm.
loud, because people internalize and don't always want to mention it, but there is that fear of the collaborative part. So thank you so much for saying that and putting it out there. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna just slightly change. Just looking ahead, John, how do you see the landscape for nonprofit funding and collaboration evolving over, well, I want to say the next 5 to 10, but in this case, maybe the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I do think the next 2 to 3 will be critical. We still have to think about 5 years out. Um, the immediate need, obviously, as we've talked about, is getting funding. But if we're looking at the horizon, I don't see the funding landscape getting dramatically different in the next couple years. The federal budget's going to shrink, the federal funding's going to change. We need to get away from the idea that we are stuck in funding streams, and it impacts us mentally that we are just looking at what one funder wants. So I think the landscape's evolving where we're mixing funding streams. We're able to talk to people about some things that make sense. There are providers who um, have three separate classes of workforce. A is funded by this group, B by this group, C by that group. We need to talk to those funders and say, let's put everybody in a room, allocate the costs among them. We need to look at other sources. As the federal government shrinks, people are saying, what foundation is going to fill this? There are none. All of them together cannot supplant the federal government. So how are we pulling businesses into this? How are we pulling other community services? How are we talking to one another to say, look, each of us does the same four things. How about if I just do one of them? And Dr. Cheryl does one, and Andre does one, and Dr. Loretta does one, and we pool our resources with one another. Are we having those conversations? And the focus again on the outcome. And I think that collaboration is going to be critically important. And with it, I think goes a communication thing. If we're watching political trends and we're looking at data, if people have a heart, they're donating. A lot of people are not donating. Why is that? They're concerned about themselves, their family, whatever. We need to be conveying we're not just charities. We are critically important pieces of the vitality of regions. So whether or not you're homeless, if there's a large homeless population in the community, it affects everyone. If people are out of work, it affects everyone. So together, are we communicating to people our impact on the quality of life and the economic vitality of the region? And are we allocating time and resources to changing how we've historically approached this discussion? And also getting involved in networks where you can have safe conversations among one another. We're all in this together. We're facing the same challenges. I think those are important changes that if you're not moving in that direction now, it will be forced on you, and it'll be too late to really be able to thoughtfully make the changes that you need to make.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that so much. Your insight is so valuable. We are coming up on another break. So when we return, Dr. Dre, I'll turn it over to you to ask John about some things with the organizations he works with. And please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. We are back with more Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. For those who are just joining us, I'm Dr. Loretta Howard, and I am the lead host for today's episode with Dr. Cheryl as well as with Dr. Dre. And our episode today is so exciting. We're talking about keeping the doors open, but sustaining nonprofits through funding, partnerships, and those mergers, which are so crucial. And today, our very special guest is John Lydon, Director of Strategic Projects and CEO Emeritus of Auberle Ward Home Pauline Auberle Foundation. With that, we're back, Dr. Dre, and it's in your hands.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, definitely enjoying the conversation. John Lydon is one of those brain trust in the nation around being creative and being very strategic. Auberle is really known for some of the most innovative and creative strategic partnerships in the country. They've been locally recognized, they've been nationally recognized. And we want to talk a little bit about a few of those programs. The first is this Employment Institute, which is an example of a very successful strategic partnership. John, would you share a little bit more about the Institute and what makes it a strategic partnership project?
Sure, Andre, and that's a good way to approach it. So let's talk about what we tried to do with it. And this goes back to pre-COVID, and pre-COVID, in Western Pennsylvania, the steel mills had declined, unemployment was up. And if people had jobs, you'd go into a room, there'd be 10 positions, there'd be 100 people applying. And Auberle serves a wide variety of people disadvantaged for a variety of reasons. So how do they fare in that room of 10 people for every job? Not well. So we looked into how could we put them at the head of the class? And we talked to a number of businesses, and they said, oh, if you had this magic piece of paper, we would hire you. And we're like, well, what is that? So in our region, pre-COVID, there were 40,000 good-paying jobs with benefits chronically unfilled. Half of them required no college. Now that number is 75,000. But you needed a certification. So we looked at these certifications. Now, in the partnership, we had to recruit employers. We needed to have real jobs, not training. We were getting you employment and helping you keep it. And that was the idea of the Employment Institute. Now we have 14 national certifications, not an Auberle certification. The Employment Institute has been recognized locally. Mutual of America last year had us in New York City with their national awards. And we now have more than 300 employer partners. And the idea behind it is it serves the need, and this is a key part of strategic partnerships. We're always worried about us. I'm not thinking about you, Andre, when I want to partner with you. I want it to be good for me. But it has to be good for you or you're not entering it. So we have the employers, we talk about their needs, we have the people we want to help who don't just want a job, they want to keep it. We only do good paying jobs with benefits. And what we do is we enter into a three-way agreement that not only are we going to train you and get you into this employment position, but we're going to follow you for 12 months. And if you don't show up at work or you have a bump in the road, the employer is going to call your coach and say, John, Andre didn't show up at work, what's happening? Oh, let me call him. We have a relationship with you. So the idea is to get you into good paying jobs. This has evolved to where there's more than 300 employers, more than 150 agencies sending people to us. We have computerized cars to start to teach you to learn to drive, to get a license. We have on-road people. Some of our partner agencies send you to us just to get a license. You can get in the union apprentice program, but you have to have a driver's license. Some of the businesses volunteer to train. They have national train the trainers. They train the people. Now, the benefit is it costs them money. They're doing something altruistic, but also at graduation, when they hand you your certificate and you're celebrating with your family, they also hand you an employment application and say, if you're interested in working here, fill this out. On references, just put my name. I'll take care of it because they've known you through the whole program. We have businesses giving us tax credits, doing mock interviews. So all these entities have come together in the Employment Institute with the idea of not getting you a job, but keeping you there. In 6 months, by the way, our data tells us nationally, if you keep a job for 6 months and you leave, you normally leave for another job. You don't leave the workforce.
Mhm.
Impressive.
Wonderful. I'm absolutely loving that. And my I should say my boss's spirit is all over me today because I keep hearing his voice and things. And he talked about personal, one might say, economic development being getting any job, going from any job to a better job to a career. And it sounds like your Employment Institute puts people on the path for doing that. So congratulations on that, John. That's remarkable work you're doing. What does success look like for the Employment Institute in 3 to 5 years? And what partnerships are essential to achieving the vision?
So success looks like, and we have been growing and growing and growing. Um, in our last fiscal year, July 1, 2004 to June 30, 25, here's one measure of success. In that year, just the people who went through certifications in that fiscal year, by the end of the fiscal year, this June 30, they had earned more than 5.2 million in taxable income. So
Wow.
this idea we're trying to sell to people, we're an important part of economic vitality in the region. We're now in 22 counties. We were invited by Central PA to come out and do this. So helping more people is a part of this, adding more capacity. And the capacity doesn't have to be ours. There are things like masonry. People say, oh, we need more people here. We got all these openings. We don't do it because the Trade Institute of Pittsburgh does it and does it well. So we
Mhm.
refer you there. We don't
Great.
we don't compete with entities doing this. So we're trying to find out who's in the space more and more. How do we connect our people with your certification? We want more partners, and we also we're getting into the point where we have gotten you trained for jobs, and now employers are sending you back to us and
Mhm.
saying, look, Dr. Cheryl could be promoted if she has your other certification of X. So
Mhm.
we would pay to send her back to you to get that certification. So we want to raise the capacity level. We're doing a lot of introduction to advanced manufacturing. A lot of our people struggle with the math and some of the requirements of that. So we're hoping to move up the level of the certifications, higher paying jobs, more success in that regard to create opportunities for people. So that's our vision over the next 3 to 5 years.
I absolutely love that informed, coordinated effort that really empowers the success of the individuals as well as the businesses that are collaborating. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much. Okay, John, still in alignment with that, what systemic barriers do our nonprofit participants seem to face that other organizations can solve alone? And how might collective partnerships address some of those systemic barriers?
So great question. And I would go back to what I said earlier. No one comes to us for one need. So let's say, Dr. Loretta, you want to hire someone. This
Mhm.
person doesn't have an address. They're homeless. Maybe they don't have a cell phone or an email address. How are you locating them? Does that seem like a desirable person that you want to bring in, even if they have a certification? So we need to look at the barriers around housing. We need to look at the issues around some people have mental health issues. They have anger management issues. So you get them a job, they don't last a week. So we have to holistically be candid with one another and sit down and say, okay, what is it going to take to get into this position and keep the job. The idea is not getting you a job. In this environment, you can get people jobs, they don't keep it. So all of the various services impact that. We don't offer all those. We don't have the ability to offer all those. So we need all these partners to be able to come in and be able to handle this. The other thing I'll just briefly mention, even in the nonprofit sector, we need to get our mind right. You know, we meet with people. I can think about meeting with the leader of a nonprofit in a community in our region that has high unemployment. And they're looking for people to who have cooking experience, ServSafe certification, to work in their food service area. So we're like, oh, you guys are perfect for that. How many people live in this community that we could train, that can walk to work? You're in a small town. Yeah, but they don't have a driver's license. Okay, so why do they need a driver's license if they walk to work? They have 15 people in their food service. What if we need to go to the store? Well, do you need to send 15 people? You know, suppose you have 4 or 5 licenses. People can't let go of either a degree requirement or a license or something that is blocking you from where you want to get to. We have this conversation for an hour, and at the end I say, well, we'll talk to our people, but you're probably not going to get anyone. When you're in a community with 20% unemployment and people across the street could be working, you could be making a difference in the community. So we have to think outside the box.
Definitely. Thank you so much, John.
John, I mean, you've got so many, and I know our time is so limited. You've got so many wonderful programs. I know we're coming up close to a break, but quickly a word about the 412 Youth Zone, which is yet another successful strategic partnership. Just a quick word about that. What's that all about?
Yeah, the 412 Youth Zone, we're charged with assisting all young people in Allegheny County. Pittsburgh's the county seat, aging out of foster care. We also have cloned this in Crawford County, north of Pittsburgh, Meadville, PA. Our job is to take people aging out and have them be productive citizens between the ages 16, 24, all young adults between 16 and 24. And the Youth Zone is a great example of a strategic partnership. We have 100+ partners, for-profit businesses, other entities. When the Allegheny County Department of Human Service conceived this idea, drop-in center with all these services, we looked at it, we were excited, we were already in the space, and we thought, we can't do that. We cannot make this happen. All these different needs. So we started the Youth Zone with 20 partners. Now we have 100. There's a medical clinic inside the Youth Zone. You need lawyers, they're there. There's the computerized car. One of our for-profit entities built a commercial music studio inside the Youth Zone. We have a clothing boutique in there. You walk through that and people are stunned at the level of services in there, but there is no way Auberle could offer that. And one quick thought on this, that was an eye-opener to people. We have these 100 partners. We don't pay them. We probably pay 10 to 12, like some of the recreational groups and different people. We said to people, Andre, if your agency partners with us in the Youth Zone, how many people do you see a month? And you're saying, well, maybe 10 because I got to travel all over. We're gathering all these people for you at the Youth Zone. You could see 10 a week just by showing up 2 days at the Youth Zone. So the collaboration benefited all the agencies and the people we serve, that we don't have to refer people to you. And the rules there are, it's always warm handoff. It is not a piece of paper with names on it. It has, again, has been recognized multiple times across the country. People have come from Europe to tour it, to talk through how do you work with all these people. Great partners.
Yeah, excellent. Jack, I can see you're excited. I'm just as excited
Yeah.
as well. So I need the tour
Yeah.
for one too. So excellent. Very good. Very good.
Just hearing about that and the work you're doing with that 16 to 24-year-old group who sometimes they fall through the cracks. So that is just so amazing. And I love the clothing boutique as opposed to a clothing bank, which that word boutique gives it a higher end kind of feel when you say it. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. All right, we're going to take another short break, and when we return, Dr. Cheryl will come back and she'll have additional questions that we'll go into. So, for our listening audience, please stay tuned so you can hear the next exciting questions that are coming up. We'll be right back with more Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. Okay, welcome back to Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors. Our special guest today is John Lydon, the Director of Strategic Products and CEO Emeritus of Auberle, Ward Home, and Pauline Auberle Foundation. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Cheryl as we go into our final segment.
All right. So, John, jumping in with yet another strategic partnership, the Ward Home. Any just tip of the iceberg words you'd like to say about it?
Yeah, the Ward Home, I think, for this program is a great and terrible example to use. Ward Home is 100 years old,
Mm,
and it had an opportunity to be in some partnerships with us, declined, and over time ran into financial difficulty. And it's one of these things where you see people wait too late to partner. And as a
mm,
result, their last year of operation, their budget was 1.1 million. They lost $500,000 in a deficit, and that had gone on for several
wow.
years.
Mm,
They tried to talk to people, taking them over. People declined because it was too far gone. And what happens in an organization when you run into financial difficulty, quality usually follows the cycle right there. You don't have enough money, you're not able to pay staff. Um, they approached us, we helped them in some ways, and then we talked to Allegheny County DHS, and They said, look, if they go under, you're going to have to rebuild this bridge because they're an important bridge between the youth zone and some of your other programs. So we ended up entering into a strategic alliance where they kept their name. The Ward Home's still alive 100 years from their start. They're a subsidiary of Auberle. When we got together in this alliance, in the year prior, they paid, for example, $66,000 for insurance. The year they were with us, they paid less than $7,000. They
Wow.
Yeah, 34,000 for rent. These are things people don't think about. They
Hmm.
came into some vacant space with us. It cost less than 3,000. They paid more in 3 months in administrative cost prior to this alliance with us than they did in the next 15 months. There's
Wow.
that synergy. We already had staff. They paid a lot of overtime. We were able to share staff and be able to cut that back. They had access to all our partners, all our programming. They had an upgrade in technology, just becoming a partner in the technology we had for phones, for data, for buildings, collaboration. We had some vacant space. We were able to move one of their programs, renovate a building, and their program move into it. Now they're financially solid. Their programming is outstanding. They've gotten per diem increases. They run 2 supervised independent living programs as 2 of their 3 programs because the quality has soared because of that synergy and that connection. And the director of all the ward programs is a longtime ward person, not an Auberle staff person. So a good example of waiting too long and not looking ahead to the horizon, but a
Hmm.
good success story about a very different kind of strategic alliance, not a merger, not a takeover, but something that fit the needs of everyone involved, especially the young people that we serve.
Yeah, great example of a wonderful strategic partnership. Thanks, John.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
John, I know we're coming to an end pretty soon here, but are there any resources, tools, networks you would recommend for nonprofits exploring strategic collaborations? And do we need a different type of leader when we think about these nonprofit organizations? Any comments on that, remarks on that?
Yeah, I think, we certainly you're aware of the Executive Leadership Institute, which I think is awesome. We send people every year to that. It isn't just about the training, it's about the networking with people all over the country to be able to learn and to share. I know that the Kellogg School does free online programming. Everyone tells you, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. At the same instant, we're able to complain about things aren't changing for us. I also think just joining networks and just looking at the partnership. A lot of times I go to programs and I don't get anything out of the program, but I go all the time because I'm seeing people I haven't seen in months. I'm asking them what they're doing on the break. I'm talking to them about what we're doing. Ideas come up, they percolate there. I think that opportunity of working together, we create board positions for student interns from the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. We do student seminars with people. We try and get out and talk to everyone we can. We're a member of the Allegheny Conference, which is the major business organizations, the huge corporate entities in Pittsburgh that get together and meet, and we share insights with them about our leadership, and we take away insights from them in that context. The biggest thing is, I think, to lift your sights up and look around you. I guarantee you, there are things in your area going on that puts you in contact with other nonprofit leaders and other business leaders. I find sometimes we have a stigma to that in the sector, We're not saying you should become a business, but there are some really creative things that you can adapt and move over to the sector. So I think having an open mind, getting away from being regimented by government regulations. Somebody said to me a few months ago when I was stepping down, they said, the great leaders understand the rules, they just don't follow them. And they look for those spaces where I understand the purpose of the rule, but I'm going to step outside it to make this work. And you'd be surprised that the funders and the government and everyone else, they want it to work well too. And the best leaders in that are not nitpicking on the bureaucracy.
That's right. Absolutely. Amen to that, John. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, John, thank you so much.
Good stuff.
We appreciate that.
Mhm.
And we have a question that we have been asking all of our guests. So one of the things we'd like to know from you, John, is what do you hope for and what brings you joy?
Well, I hope for a billionaire passing on without descendants that I've never met, but is just thrilled with the Auberle story and leaves us a major bequest. But I really hope for us changing our focus and attitude in the sector. And a lot of people are there. A lot of us are collaborating and talking. I think the idea is, to Andre's point, we need to approach things very differently and open. And what brings me joy, a lot of things, and we can't lose sight of that. Sometimes, especially when it's pressured, you want to be focused on some things that bring you joy. And my grandchildren definitely do that. And what's funny about that is sometimes you're explaining something to them, and a little voice in the back of your mind says to you while you're talking to them, and I'm talking like our oldest is 5 years old, and a little voice goes, "Do you really believe that? What about the decision you're making in this area of the nonprofit? Does it sound like you believe this?" And it really causes you to stop and think about, are we really doing what we say we should be doing? And then are you comfortable enough to implement change around that?
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So, as we come to the close, John, if our listeners wanted to contact you, how would they contact you?
You can contact me directly by email on John, JOHNLY, at Auberle, AUBERLE.org, John L.Y. at Auberle.org. I'm on LinkedIn, not on Facebook or most of the other social media. It's hard enough to do things. And I love talking to people and connecting with people. That's where ideas germinate.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you to my fellow co-hosts, Dr. Cheryl, Dr. Dre. Thank you, John Lydon, for being our guest today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our listening audience. We invite you to send your questions and continue to send those questions and topics you're interested in learning about to Leadership Matters Questions at innovisions.org. That's Leadership Matters Questions at innovisions.org. So please join us every Wednesday on YouTube at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And until the next time on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, where we are informing leaders and inspiring solutions, have a great week, everyone.